right now it has a bad product market fit. So the product is not really, for whom is it actually?
It was actually a hype and it was only popular because it was popular. So, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Innovation Engineer Podcast, your favorite place for picking brains of your favorite engineers. So grab your nerdiest mugs, fill it with your beverage of choice, and enjoy. My name is Tarek.
And my name is Washi, and today we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is audio. So I'm a huge audio nerd, started actually years ago, and this having your own podcast is a trend nowadays. Everyone needs a podcast, as you know. So, but this is one question I always feel is very important is, did audio actually kill the video star? Is audio now more important than video? How big will it actually be, right?
Yeah, that's totally true. And intuitively, I would say that's crazy because audio is like a very old format. And in the very past, we listened to radio. And the phrase that you just used, it comes from video killed the radio star, right? When the music videos were killing the back then standard of radio. And so this is crazy. But in the past years, we actually saw so much uprising of this trends of podcast and audio formats that it's really interesting to look into it, why this happened and why it became so popular in the last years. Yeah. So maybe Vashi, why is it one of your favorite topics?
So because it's asynchronous and easy to listen to. So back in the days when I started working for Siemens around 2007-8, we were listening to radio a lot. So when we were in our outpost, actually on the mining site, we were listening to radio all day. That's what we programmed to. And later on, especially when I got a son, I was going around with my son a lot, and you don't have your hands free. So, but I got AirPods, the true wireless headsets from Apple. And what do you do when you're going around? You don't have your hands free, you're listening to things. So it's obviously not only podcasts, it's also audiobooks. So I love reading. So I do read since, I'm a teenager. I read a lot of books, so really, really a lot of books. And when I started my career, I also read a lot of technical books on the weekends, on my commute times and so on. But nowadays, when you have more things to do and you have more stuff you need to take care of, like your family and your job and so on, my reading time became less and less and less. And then I just started, after I started with podcasts, I started with audiobooks. There was wow, again, it feels like reading again. So now I have more time. I can use times when I'm driving my car, for example, to listen to a book. Back in the days, I just was listening to maybe music or radio, but this was just background noise, not active listening. And now I can use this time way better. So with podcasts and audiobooks, my day feels like it doesn't have 24 hours before I started doing it. It feels like 30 hours at least. So I have more time for me, more time for stuff I really like. So this really helps me to get into my hobbies again, like reading, but kind of terms of listening. Yeah. So what's with you? Yeah, I know, you also listen to podcasts, right?
Yeah, but I only started recently. I'm basically someone who really enjoys video formats, and I'm watching stuff, and for a very, very long time, I did not understand where this hype is coming from. And so only recently I started listening to podcasts because there is this huge volume of people creating them and so many topics that you really have the liberty to choose from. And then I started listening to podcasts when I was driving a car or I'm outside. Not so much for working out, for example. There I still enjoy listening to music. But whenever I need my main intention somewhere else, then I'm not watching videos, but actually to listen to podcasts. But I'm very, very selective. I'm really choosing what I'm listening to. I don't have this huge queue of podcasts that I need to listen to. And also radio, I'm not really enjoying radio. So I'm very, very selective. And that's why I'm still skeptical if this is really something that will kill the video star. Yeah.
Yeah, when say video star again, which reminds me, do you know what the first video was MTV played when what they aired as a first video?
Of course, I wanted to say I was there, but that's a lie. I'm not that old. No, but of course, yeah. I saw like the historic documentations of the first broadcast of MTV. Yeah, it was exactly the song, right? Video killed the radio star from I forgot what band it was.
Oh, I also don't know. I know the song and I probably could sing it a little bit. But yeah, so that was like kind of prediction what will happen, what they wished for. And in the beginning, it was just like a nice thing, like, video, like music videos on television. Nobody really believed this would be a big thing, right? They laughed a little bit about it in the beginning. Yeah. So and then later, especially in the 90s, before the internet actually, so internet changed the game again. But there was like this time where it was impossible to bring out a new song without a video. That was like crazy times.
Right,
so it's
right.
Like you want to listen to music.
Yeah. Right, yeah, and it felt a little bit arrogant if you take a look at the old claim of MTV, but it was true, and they foresaw that this new, and this is the interesting part when we talk about this metaphor today, they knew that this new emergence of technology and capability of color TV and everyone is going to have 1 or 2 or 5 TV sets at home, this is the new option of consuming media, and so they thought, why should anyone listen to radio anymore if everyone has like a TV set in every single room and we have more channels and more channels, and that's true. And if we take a look at this today, it does not make sense to say let's remove video and listen to audio only, and I still want to discuss why people today are rejecting like the video formats and go back to the basics, basically. Yeah.
So I have a funny story for you. So back in 2020, I was working for Bertelsmann, a huge media company in Europe, and they also own the biggest streaming service in Germany, which is TV Now. So which is nowadays called RTL Plus. But we worked on a new television app, and they also own Audio Now, which is a big podcasting platform, and they also produce exclusive podcasts only for this platform, so like an app. And they had the question, should we bring our podcasts to our TV app? And I was like, what the fuck? Why are you even asking who would like listen to a podcast on a TV? I said, that's a stupid idea. Just work, which is wasted. And then we did research, market studies, interviews, the normal stuff. And what came out was, the results were, a lot of people right now, this year, listened to podcasts over television. And I was like, why? And then I asked even my mother. They said, yeah, when I'm like ironing like a shirt, I'm listening to podcasts. There was this famous Corona podcast back in the time. And she was listening to this podcast through the television because that's the device she used how to use and handle. That was like how she was used to the flow. And then I asked others, or like one day I even came home and even my girlfriend was listening to a podcast on a television. It was like, oh my God, but you're like my age. Why do you do this? You have like an iPhone. You could just we have so many Bluetooth speakers in our home. Why don't you use them? I was like really astonished actually to see that the research was right, and a lot of people listen to podcasts over television, obviously without pictures, because there was like just like the name of the podcast displayed.
Yeah. And now that you're saying this, in my mind, I try to like recap some great podcasts. And if you think about it, of course, you could like watch these people talk to each other or with themselves. But it wouldn't be that interesting because like you're watching us right now, right? The people who are watching this podcast right now, there's not so much happening in front of the camera. You can see our faces and everything, but the content itself is the valuable thing here. And so it does not matter if you switch the video off and simply listen. And so if there's a podcast or like some radio format that is really interesting, you are not necessarily need the visual support in there. And probably because there are now so many people creating these interesting topics about true crime or technology or, I don't know, mental health and all these things, frogs, whatever. There's probably a frog podcast somewhere out there. And you can listen to it. And you do not really need the visuals unless it is like a very sophisticated documentation, and then you have all the video stuff in there. But it's not necessary for getting the content out there. And I really like that basically everyone can do a podcast, and everyone is doing a podcast. And all you need is like a phone. You just need a phone, you record it, and it might not be like the best quality, but still you might find some content that other people want to listen to. Yeah. And I think that was also the charm of YouTube, for example, when everyone was able to create some videos more or less in high quality. And this is maybe also the trend that people are jumping onto today. Yeah, it's content from everyone to everyone.
Which reminds me of my two favorite podcasts. So the first one is a runners podcast. It's from Germany's and actually world biggest running magazine, which is Runner's World. And they have a German podcast, Runner's World podcast. It's the worst podcast I've ever heard. It's produced so badly, they don't even try. You know, this is like professional journalists making a podcast, and they are paid for it. And it's so bad. They just take a random microphone, put it in the middle of a room and just talk. They don't even cut it. They don't edit it. So the quality is so bad, and I'm still listening to it. So, and why? Because that's the people who know the most about running, which I really love, and they are telling so many interesting things. They even accept this bad quality just to listen to them. And I'm always like thinking, oh my God, this quality is so bad. So there are other running podcasts out there which are produced on a high level, so really well produced and really well cut. But still, that's not like the Runner's World podcast, where they have the best people in there with the most knowledge telling interesting stories. So that's the point. It's content. Right?
Yeah, right.
And I want to tell you about my second favorite podcast, or maybe my favorite podcast overall, which is the Stack Overflow Podcast, which is one of the oldest podcasts out on the internet, actually. It's so old. They started it by taping their phone calls. So they just had a phone call, and there are like telephone systems they used was able to record it. And that's how they created the first episodes of the podcast.
Yeah, reminds me.
Crazy, right?
It's crazy, but it reminds me of the Tech Review podcast, the Axel Springer Ideas Tech Review podcast, which is also kind of a phone call. It's a Teams meeting, and it's just recorded and streamed as a podcast, right? But the thing is, I personally I like the authenticity, what you just said of people simply want to get the message out there, and so it might not even be the highest quality podcast, even though it makes listening easier. I think if it's really well produced and you have high audio quality, it makes it easier to listen to. But also, it might have a certain charm for the listener to simply tap into something like a phone call. Yeah, so it's really like you're just listening in of what they are doing all the time. I barely have regular podcasts that I'm like subscribed to and listen to every single episode. Usually I'm Googling or get recommendations for certain episodes for some podcasts, and then I'm switching them. There's one podcast that I'm not able to leave. That's the Rooster Teeth Podcast from Rooster Teeth Productions in Texas. And the weird thing is, I'm not even watching their videos or their shows or their content, but these people are so hilarious. Their weekly podcast, they are just sitting together, 4 or 5 people, and they are recapping everything that happened in the week. So here something went wrong and I read an article there, and they are just talking to each other, and they are so hilarious in their chemistry and how they are interacting. It's just so enjoyable for me to listen in and having fun together with them while they are like drinking a beer or just laughing about crazy things that happened, or misunderstandings, or accidents on set or something like that. Yeah. So weirdly, their podcast is just like a supporting thing that they are doing on the side next to their actual productions. And I don't consume the actual productions. I'm simply watching like this behind the scene podcast when they are recapping their week. That's just for fun. Yeah. It's not even educational. It's really just for fun. And it's totally fine that it's audio only.
And I think you answered your own question. So why are specific formats so successful? Why is audio so successful? It's personal, right? So that's also the charm of low production quality. Even some television stations in Germany. So when Corona started, they needed to produce some shows, some interviews, via low quality phone calls, Skype calls, whatever they just had, because people could not come to studios. So, and that was a trend, especially for the yellow press when they interviewed some people, and it became highly successful. That even public television stations copied this trend, and they really tried to produce lower quality stuff because it felt more authentic. So it felt more personal. And the same is true of podcasts. So you're actually kind of taping into a talk between people, like people just sitting in a coffee corner in an innovation tech startup, and you're just listening to what they talk to, right? And that's the charm. It's way more personal. You get to know the people way more often. So when I was interviewed for a podcast in 2019, one of my favorite podcasts from a person called Florian. I've never met him before. He worked for the same company I worked for, but I have listened to 20 episodes of his podcasts. So then he asked me, Vashi, do you want to come to my podcast? And I was, yes. And I started talking with him. And then I realized, okay, I'm way too personal with him. I know a lot about him. It feels like we are friends, but he does not know me actually. So that's the feeling the podcast it created within me, that I know this person really as kind of a friend.
Right.
So, which reminds me of another thing which created this feeling, which is Clubhouse. This one strange app which emerged beginning of, I guess, 2020, whenever, and then 2021 became super famous. Is it already dead again?
It depends who you ask. If I looked into the stats, because the company itself is quite interesting, and especially the big hype from last year. But I personally don't know anyone who is actively using Clubhouse. I tried it once, and I know some people who tried it, and it was nice. Yeah, it was nice, but nothing so special. Yeah. But if you take a look at the numbers, Clubhouse is really booming, and in the heights of 2021, I think there was even an offer from eBay to buy Clubhouse for what was it, $4 billion or something like that. So the value of this company is obviously very high, and Clubhouse refused this offer. They wanted to keep growing and being independent. And in the past, it was so hyped with these invitation codes. You were not able to log into this app without an invitation code. And people were buying these invitation codes on eBay for hundreds of dollars. It was this high in demand. And today, I think, when was it? Someone in the beginning of the year or something, they said, okay, let's remove this invitation thing, and now everyone can be onboarded. But they are not able to onboard everyone at the same time. And so they created this waiting list. And I think I read that there are still 10 million people on this waiting list waiting to join. And it might be, and now this is of course just interpretation. It might be that all of these people, they joined this waiting list maybe a year ago, and they don't even know that they're still on the waiting list. So Clubhouse is still bragging with 10 million people waiting to join. But nobody, I don't know if anybody can say this, but I'm not sure how successful Clubhouse is today, because the hype is kind of over. Nobody is still speaking about Clubhouse. 6 months ago, it was still a big thing, and everybody wanted to go to Clubhouse when Elon Musk was there and Mark Zuckerberg was there, but I'm not sure if they are still Clubhousing. Yeah. So it's a good question. I don't know. I think I still have it still on my phone. Sometimes I get the push notification, but I never log in. It's not that interesting for me. I personally, I now understand, even though I'm late to the game, where podcasts can be valuable. They are discoverable, they are searchable. You can pick your episodes or your podcasts, so it's on demand, and that's the quality of on-demand media, right? And Clubhouse is, you could say, live-streamed podcasts or live-streamed interactive podcasts. But this does not have, especially for me, this quality that I'm searching for, because I can't see what is happening in there before I go in there. Yeah, and I'm very picky in the content that I'm consuming, and so I need to know in advance what it's about, and that's why then in this case podcast fits better for me. Do you have a feeling about Clubhouse and if they are on an upwards or downwards trend?
Yeah, so I love audio. So when Clubhouse emerged, everyone was like, yeah, Clubhouse is the next big thing. I tried to like it. Problem is, first of all, the audio quality. It's so bad. It feels like a telephone call from the 19s. So bad was the audio quality. So I couldn't listen to this. I like that it was so personal. So you got to meet a lot of famous people. So it was really it felt like live listening to some really famous people, politicians. So in Germany, a lot of politicians jumped onto this train. So it was really nice to hear top level Minister of Defense, Agriculture, whatever, talk about some topics. There were some scandals because of this, because it felt like a private room, but obviously it was public. So they said some stupid things. So that's when politicians realized, okay, maybe Clubhouse is not the best platform for them. And the other thing is, like you said, it's live. So I got this push notification. Oh, something really cool is happening. But it's right in my family time. So I'm having dinner with my son or whatever, or I need to pick something up. So I can't listen right now. So that's why I love podcasts and audiobooks. I can listen in the time I can't do other things. But with Clubhouse, it's not searchable. It's not discoverable, like you said. So that's an issue. And I really think it was the right time for it, because everyone was in quarantine or working from home. And then they could not go to conferences, could not do other things, less interviews, because television was not yet adjusted to this new circumstances. And then Clubhouse emerged. It was the right thing. It was exclusive, and exclusiveness, that's something which sells well all the time. You know why some sneakers or some watches are so valuable? Because they only produce 10 of them, right? That's why they're expensive. So the same happened with Clubhouse, because it was invite only. A lot of famous people started using it. They were bored at home. Yeah, and I think it has a bad product market fit. So the product is not really, for whom is it actually? So obviously it was not really for politicians, because it didn't work out. Famous people could be, but now they are able to give interviews again on television, other things, and so on, which actually have a wider audience in Clubhouse. Because if they do a Clubhouse interview, maybe 500, maybe 1,000 people listen. If you do an interview with a television station, whatever, it will be available via stream. It will be findable. There will be a transcript. And obviously, the audience, when they air it, is way, way bigger. So why would any famous people go to Clubhouse where the audience is so limited? It was just like a nice thing to play around with, a hype thing. So everybody said it will be the next big thing. But when it already started, I had the feeling that it will not stay. It was just a short-lived hype. And even on LinkedIn, when Clubhouse was big, everyone on LinkedIn was talking about Clubhouse. And for the last, I would say even last 6 months, nobody talked about it ever again.
Yeah, that's a strong indication that it was actually a hype, and it was only popular because it was popular. Even though from technological point of view, it was an interesting. I already say it is an interesting concept to jump into this niche. Because we are using video conferences every day, and video conferences, they also have their limitations of number of cameras that can be switched on at the same time, like how many video feeds can be processed at the same time, and even the maximum number of participants. And you just said that that Clubhouse has a very low audio quality, which is true, but at the same time, it's very impressive that they managed to deal with hundreds of listeners at the same time, which can be individually brought into the conversation and thrown out, I think. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with what they're doing, but I believe this is the quality that they can really have a huge crowd listening in and dynamically add people to the speaker list. And so they are a little bit more scalable than video conferences. And if it's simply for exchanging information, it's like with a podcast, you don't necessarily need video. And so this is a niche that is valuable to be filled by a company, but I'm not sure, and this is the big question, if they are really suited for being one of the mainstream platforms for communication or pseudo podcasting, right? So I guess they will stay for a certain type of group and conversations and events, but the majority of people will probably go back to YouTube or simply on-demand podcasting, depending on what they're trying to do. And when I say YouTube, I mean like live streaming, Twitching, YouTubing, everything that you can do live.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Clubhouse is not the next big thing and not the next big thing in audio. It was very funny that you said like the scaling quality of Clubhouse, because there's a very famous blog post which Clubhouse published about the technical issues they had, and they gave a lot of insights about the technical issues. Remind me at the end of the episode, I really need to tell you this because it's very interesting for technical listeners and viewers. But let's jump actually back to the question, what is the next big thing? Because Clubhouse, it's obviously not, but the numbers still are growing. So like if I think back in 2019-20, when everyone was still talking about podcasts, there had the growth numbers. So even in the German market was growing year by year. And still the American market, which you can always say they are ahead of the European market 3 to 4 years always. It was already 3 times as big compared to the German market. So you knew actually back in the days that the German audio market would grow immensely in the upcoming years. And it was true. So like again, in end of 2020, I was working for Bertelsmann, and they had this television channel, RTL, which is the most successful television channel in Germany. And they're producing a lot of, how's it called? Real life documentary stuff. How is it called actually, this style of things? Where you put
like
people...
reality TV?
Yeah, kind of reality TV, yes. So, and they had different formats like Guilty Island or whatever. I'm not just into normal television, so I don't know exact stuff. So, but I knew the numbers because I was working on their TV app and on their podcasting stuff. And they had this show which aired at 10 in the evening, 10 p.m. For 1 hour. A lot of viewers, like really successful. And then after that episode, they had a podcast for 1 hour where they talked about the show and had some of the participants also talking in it. So, and this obviously aired from 11 p.m. in the night until midnight. And I was like, okay, after you watched for 1 hour in the night, real life, whatever show, and then who's going to listen to a podcast discussing actually only this one single episode? And then I saw the numbers and the money they made with ads. And I was like, what the hell? Hundreds of thousands of people still listen directly after they aired the TV show on TV. They are listening to the podcast.
Yeah.
I was like astonished. I was like, who the hell does this? Middle in the night. So, and if you just look into the numbers of ad revenues, even the growth in 2021, you could say, okay, actually podcast, audio growth and audiobooks, maybe it's already peaking. But if you look at the growth numbers of 2021 last year, it's still going very, very strong. And I would say for the next years, the market will grow immensely. So I don't know when the peak will be reached, but like podcasts are still booming like hell. And there are like doubling ad revenues nearly each year. And if you look at ad revenues from big radio channels, from even traditional newspaper publishers, and also from Spotify, they are making a lot of money through advertisement and podcasts. Actually, that's one of their biggest segments, and it is still growing.
Yeah. Now that you're telling this story with these companion podcasts to other formats, this reminds me that I actually listened to a podcast back in the time where I had no idea what a podcast was. And now that I'm remembering, it totally makes sense, and it even had the name. It was like 8 years ago or so when I watched the show Battlestar Galactica, the new version of Battlestar Galactica. There was a podcast on YouTube which was always airing directly after the latest episode, and it was called the Battlestar Galacticast. And so it was kind of exactly this podcast. It was two people who were watching the latest episode, and immediately afterwards sitting together discussing for an hour what happened in the latest episode. And they were so good in the way that they were recapitulating all the story elements and the character developments. And because I was so into the show, I really enjoyed listening to them analyzing the story. And this was maybe one of the first companion podcasts to a TV show production or something like that. And I was not aware that this was like a podcast. And I watched it on YouTube, even though I had no idea what a podcast was. And I think today there is not only in German television, I think even HBO and the major networks, they actually have this format where people are discussing the latest episode, and it is directly broadcasted after the premiere of the latest episode of show XY. I think it was with The Walking Dead, I saw this, and Game of Thrones. I think they had something like that, where after the episode,
yeah, definitely,
yeah, and it's a thing, yeah. And I guess the target audience is obviously the hardcore fans who can't get enough, and after they watch the original content, they need to stay in there. They need to stay immersed, and they need this virtual group of hardcore fans staying in there, and they could probably listen for 2 or 3 or 5 hours of additional material, even though it's not from the actors or it's not from the author, but simply having like-minded people discussing the thing that they are burning to talk about.
Yes, and you learn a lot of things, actually. So if you watch something, you're actually really hungry to get to know more about the backgrounds and stuff. And those are the people who know the things. And one of my favorites is actually kind of not really a long podcast, but some special episodes about Rick and Morty and the Szechuan sauce. And this is like produced by, I think it was 3 parts, produced by Kotaku, the gaming nerd website. And it was like a special 3-episode podcast about the backgrounds, about why they did it, Rick and Morty, and actually what the fans did, like how they reacted, what happened with McDonald's, kind of a thriller wise. And really great. I loved it. You need to listen to it. And also, what the sister of my girlfriend listens to a lot is true crime podcasts. So it's another thing. And somehow true crime, so like really telling crime stories, is the most successful podcast genre in Germany. So I was like, okay, so I can understand companion podcasts, right? That totally makes sense. If you're a fanboy or a fangirl, you love this kind of stuff. So you will listen to this kind of things. But true crime, there is not like much other true crime formats in television. It's mainly podcasts.
Yeah.
And it's highly successful.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Even though you could imagine that true crime in Germany is not that interesting as in the USA, for example, where you have these really crazy crime dramas. Yeah, I mean, crime in Germany is probably someone scratched my car, right?
Yeah, but they are not only talking about Germany. Obviously, there are some really, really interesting cases in Germany, and they're also like talking about 40-year-old cases.
Oh, okay.
But some are also talking about like international cases. So it depends on, right? So everything which is interesting to these true crime fans. But I think it's easier to create a podcast from production, like money-wise, I would say, than creating a television show or even a magazine. So who would have created a true crime television show? It would most likely not be successful on television. But like there are fans out there, and if you can please them, that's very great. So there are like a lot of different, I would say, fandoms and like interests and niches. And with podcasts, where it's easier to produce them, you can create content for a wider, for a more niche audience, for actually more, I would say, quantity. So it's not about the quality of a single podcast, but you can like create something for everyone, which I really like. This also explains a little bit the success, because it turns out there are a lot of niche topics people are interested in, which they don't get content through other media.
Yeah. But now, Vashi, you already hyped me up for all these technical limitations and the blog post of Clubhouse, where you wanted to tell me about what actually went on there behind the scenes. What was that about?
Yeah, so The thing is, Clubhouse was like an unknown app actually before Corona. So I think it started 2019, 2020. Some people started talking about it, and then they had their breakthrough, right? So within, I would say, 4 weeks, their traffic increased, and those numbers are directly from that blog post, from 10,000 requests a minute to 1 million backend requests a minute. So they only had like 2 full-time backend engineers. And the sad thing is their backend was written in Python. And Python is known to not be very resource efficient. And that's the thing. So in another podcast episode, I really need to talk to you about like, is Go language, the language Go, Golang, really saving the world? Because a lot of companies are nowadays switching from other languages to Go because it promises performance. And even the company I'm working right now for, Bitly, they started with Python and did in the last 2 years rewrite everything in Go. For performance reasons. I mean, Bitly is really big, so they are like the biggest link shortener. They have millions of requests, so it makes sense. But as I said, Clubhouse started with Python. Their traffic increased, and the sad thing is their servers needed to auto-scale at around 1/3 of CPU usage. So it was very, very wasteful because Python was not able to really. It's not only like wasting a lot of CPU because it's imperformant. It's also not able. They used Galacticast with Nginx, and it was not able to really use the full server actually. And then they just scaled up to over 1,000 servers because it's the only thing they could do because there was no other options for them. And then the load balancer of their whatever pseudo cloud provider had issues, and they could not had a lot of like outages and servers when they tried to scale or when they tried to do deployments, and the load balancer had issues. They couldn't find the reasons. So then they thought, okay, maybe we need bigger servers. So let's bring out the big guns. And they tried to switch to, if I remember correctly, the servers from, 8 virtual CPUs to 96 virtual CPUs per server. And then they had a lot of other issues again, and it was not able to scale, so on and so on. And the end of the story is Python really did suck. It was not able to scale. Even their whatever niche cloud provider they used was not able to scale with the load balancer of over 1,000 instances. Then they had Nginx, which was not able to handle multiple instances of Galacticast because now they had 96 CPUs, needed to somehow use them, did not work out, and they needed to find some solutions. Obviously, the best choice would have been to, if you want to bring something to scale, use a language and some frameworks which are doing this out of the box, right? If you would write something in Go, for example, or most likely even in Java, you would have not had these issues, right? But they had, and the solution was replacing Nginx with HA proxy, so high available proxy, which is another software.
Yeah.
So to somehow get the systems up, but still they had so many troubles scaling. So that was the biggest issue when they become successful. They were not able to scale for a long time. So that was, I guess, one of the reasons why they had this still had this invite system. It could not release an Android app. So I guess the Android app was iOS only. And they released the Android app, I guess, the beginning of this year. And my guess is that they would not have been able to release the Android app because they already had performance issues. They could not take in more users. It was impossible. Yeah. So actually, maybe nowadays they would have been still a thing if they were able to open up right from the beginning. But because their system was too much request-based, so that was really not written to scale, actually, also from the architecture and from the technology choices. I think this is also a reason why they are not successful nowadays.
Yeah, it's really weird because I thought, or my expectation from this kind of company was that when they started, one of their prime let's say business goals would be scalability, because what is the niche that they are filling up? It is like huge crowds of people who want to join these audio rooms, right? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not the size that they were targeting, but like the specific interest groups or something. But my expectation would have been that they target scalability from the first day on. And seeing this tech stack, it does not really read this way. Yeah,
first of all, startups should not aim for this. So in general, maybe we should have a dedicated episode where we talk about scaling technically and company-wise, because this is a really cool topic in my opinion. So, but the first thing a startup should aim for is speed and features and not scalability. So you should sacrifice everything for speed, because you need to, if you go by Eric Ries's lean startup, you should try out as many things as possible, and then scalability is not that important. That you can bring in later on. So just you need to try out a lot of different things. So and when you use Python, which is very efficient for like data science, experimentations, prototyping. So Python is great for this kind of things, right? So it's actually the right choice to start with. The problem is if you become successful overnight, you have a lot of issues. But even if you use other technologies, I could give you some examples, you will run into limitations. Limitations you have never known before existed, right?
Right. And as you just said, maybe this was the aspect that broke Clubhouse in the end, and they might have been more successful if they would have been able to scale faster. Yeah.
Yes, we'll never know. But coming back to actually our original topic, podcasts, have you actually talked about, you said Battlestar, cast, whatever, what podcast actually means? Where does this word come from? It's not very natural word, right? You would normally call it an audio stream or whatever, right? Why is it called podcast?
Yeah, I don't have the perfect answer for that. I Googled about this because I was also curious. And the easy answer is that the word pod comes from the iPod, because at the day when Apple was big with the iPod, they introduced the podcast format in iTunes, and so they were the ones making podcasts or this audio format popular, and so it makes sense to have it like named podcast. But I also read that the original author or the inventor of the word podcast was someone, I think, a developer, what was his name? Danny Gregoire on the iPodder dev mailing list. And he asked this question, like, how should we call something like this? Yeah, let's call it a podcast. Yeah, and so it was just brainstorming in this mailing list. And this was in 2004. So obviously before it was adopted by Apple. And so the question would be if Apple is actually the inventor of the word podcast, or if they are simply taking on this word and driving it further. And I also read that people do not like to use podcast in the term like iPod, but simply using something like produced or produce on demand or something like this. Yeah, so using the word POD as some acronym for something, even though it derived from the time where people were developing stuff for the podcast. And interestingly, from the economic point of view, the iTunes Store was using the podcast format on Apple only, of course, because it was iTunes. And so they always were like this closed format. And when later the companies like Spotify, for example, they jumped onto the train and also adopted audio formats in this way, like radio on demand, they were this open platform. Yeah, Spotify was open for everyone. And so from today's point of view, even though Apple was the one bringing the podcast format to the masses, they are not necessarily the leader anymore, because there are today so many open platforms who are preferable, because they are not only Apple limited to Apple, that you could say that Apple made a bad business choice back then when they had this golden topic or this golden format exclusively in their hands, and today they are surpassed by other platforms. And yeah, today podcasts are not necessarily known for being an Apple product, but simply like an open format that you can enjoy anywhere, and you can basically also download podcasts wherever. You are not even limited to a podcast platform.
Yeah,
and so
which is funny. I also started listening to podcasts on an iPod Touch second generation. That was the first iPod I got, and that's what actually brought me into this. So I remember now, it like 15 years ago, I started on an iPod.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't. As I said, yeah, I was completely unaware of the history and all the formats. For me, it was really like, what's the thing? And I'm using Spotify, and so I open up Spotify and I'm just searching for it, independent from Apple.
Yeah. So sad thing for Apple, great thing for us that it's now wider used because,
Right.
Apple is always like a closed garden. So you either are an iOS or iPod or an iPhone user or you're not, like with Clubhouse. But it's not open for everyone. I prefer things which are open for everyone because it makes it successful. My mother would never have an iPhone, but she has like TV and a listening podcast to TV. And also trying to answer the original question is... audio killing the video star? I think it's very clear that it's not because it's something different, right? Because even YouTube is now having podcasts, and there are like even like ranking podcasts in the search algorithm which have video better than which only have like a picture in there. So it's a widely used format. But one thing which we didn't really touch is actually radio, because I think radio is really dying. So if I remember, a lot of people I knew from back in the days who, while working, listened to radio, they are nowadays either listening to Spotify or they're listening to podcasts, often podcasts in Spotify, actually.
Exactly. This would have been exactly my answer. So does it kill video? No, absolutely not. If you want to watch something on video, you're not moving away from the video and listening to podcasts. But this on-demand format kills radio even more, because which audience is captured or which audience is converted? It's exactly the radio audience. And the good question would be, who still listens to radio? Those who do not have access to anything else.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, even my mother, while ironing a shirt, is actually listening to podcasts. I would assume before she listens to either music or most likely radio, because she's a generation who grew up more with radio and listening to radio. They even taped radio shows and made mixtapes out of radio recordings, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, sad times for radio.
Yeah, it is actually. But, it's not only like radio producers. So Bertelsmann also owns the biggest RTL radio network in Germany. They jumped onto this podcast train. So all the exclusive podcasts and so on are produced within their actually radio network. So they, at least in Germany, they saw this trend and they jumped onto it. So right now it's especially professional journalists and radio so on who are producing the most successful podcasts actually, right?
Yeah, right.
So I think the market will change. Maybe in some years it will be our children will just know it as radio, and what they actually mean is podcasts, because it's not really radio. So maybe the name will change in like 10 years.
Yeah. And I'm curious to see what comes next, because kind of we already have everything. Yeah. Now maybe the metaverse will bring some new whatever format, like immersive storytelling, true crime while you're standing in the middle of it or something. Yeah, this might be something. But in terms of classic media, we have audio, we have video. So I'm not sure if we can extend this realm, or maybe the Elon Musk brain implants. Yeah.
Oh yeah, brain implants. That's great. So I really want one. It would be great because you already currently I need to click on so many stuff here. So being able to control like my video camera right now with my brain would be awesome.
Yeah. Even though it sounds scary, and I'm guessing a lot of things will go wrong.
Yeah, we could talk about being a cyborg in one of another episode, because I actually am on the way to become one. Very personal story. But I actually, if we want to talk about the hottest topics right now in engineering, I think the scaling topic and actually what happened with Clubhouse on a technical level would be great. And also like talking about the Golang as a language, and if it's safe engineering, make everything scalable, would be, is it actually true, right?
Yeah. It sounds amazing. Let's put this on the backlog and wrap it up for now with Clubhouse and audio killing video or not. Yeah. So thank you very much, Vashi, for all the inputs and the personal stories. And let's. First of all, everyone who's listening right now, let us know what you think about Clubhouse, because obviously there are millions of people who are crazy fans of Clubhouse and using Clubhouse for everything. But at the same time, I don't know anyone who's doing this. So please leave us a comment what you're using Clubhouse for, if you're using Clubhouse, or if you are a hater of Clubhouse. I also want to hear about this one. Yeah. And apart from that, thanks for listening or watching. And see you and hear you next time. Do we already have a topic for next one? Do we already have a topic? No.
Not really, but I think I want to talk either about like how is it for working for an American company, because I knew you just came back from the US. Right. So I would love to just talk how is it working for an US tech company, right?
That's true. So many stories there. So definitely come back for the next episode. We will probably talk about America, Silicon Valley, and the high-tech startup scene. So bye for now.
Bye.